Should be live now. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning. I'm with Ryan Scott today. Ryan is a really amazing designer. He's ex DoorDash, ex Airbnb, and also Palantir. And the main reason we have him here today is to rate all the companies based on their prestige. Thank you so much for joining today, Ryan, because most of the other recruiters and designers I hit up were just like, no, I want absolutely zero part in this. I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. So thank you for having the
That's fair.
components. Yeah, I get it. But also, you have two Maven courses online right now. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because they seem really interesting.
Yeah, and running my own business and teaching on Maven's the reason I can jump into this conversation without any fear of totally torpedoing my career. I teach a couple courses on Maven. I just launched a PM masterclass for designers, and I teach another course called Describing the ROI of Design, which is all about helping non-designers understand design from a business perspective so we can kind of connect the dots for people and they can choose to invest in us as designers. So I've worked with a couple thousand designers over the last year. And I love this community and I love this audience. And so I'm excited to break down this topic today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's got really amazing ratings based on what I've seen so far on Maven. And a few people have already reached out to me telling me that this is one of the best courses they've taken ever.
Oh,
So
awesome.
by all means, definitely check out the courses. I think they're worth it. So yeah,
Thank you.
let's just dive right into this because I do want to set a few ground rules or just precursors to this because I think on the surface this sounds kind of gross. It's like let's rank all the companies from the best to the worst. And while it looks like that on the surface, I do think it's really important that we do talk about it because, well, first of all, this is not a value judgment. So if we rate one company a little bit higher than the others, does not mean that that company is better. Like you'll be a better designer if you go there, or that you're a better designer because you work there, or anything like that. In fact, in my own experience, some of the best design teams I've been on have been in companies that really weren't considered to be a good design company from the outside. And just by having a really great manager who believed in me, who kind of saw the potential, I was able to elevate my career a lot more than companies I worked at where people were like, wow, that's really cool. You work on cool stuff, or your design team is great. And it's all very situational, in my opinion. And furthermore, I think it's really important that we do talk about the logic and the illogical assumptions that we make intuitively when we talk about companies. So, the more we talk about it, the more we better understand why we make these decisions and how we can maybe pivot or control the conversation around it so that we're not further propagating or perpetuating this kind of bias in the hiring process. And also, everyone does this. So before anyone starts making judgments, realize that you do it as well as candidates. I know all hiring managers, recruiters, designers, they all have these assumptions or rankings of which kind of companies are better than others. So, for example, if you're a candidate, you probably have an idea of the top 5 companies you want to work at for different reasons. And you're going to rank them and elevate them. And then there are companies that you might not want to work at. And with recruiters, the first message that we send to hiring managers about a designer candidate is going to be something like, hey, Ryan Scott has worked at Airbnb, Palantir, and DoorDash. So he's going to be pretty good. Do you want to open a conversation with him? And that's pretty much, I mean, it's not every single recruiter does it, but I would say the majority does it this way. And same with hiring managers. So if you know that somebody worked at, say, Airbnb, you're more open to giving them a conversation initially versus somebody who's worked at a company you've never heard of before. So I think it's important for us to talk through it all. Anything you want to add, Ryan?
Let's start there. There's lots of thoughts
Yeah.
I have, but I think once we get into the process, it'll kind of reveal a lot.
Yeah. So I use the S tier ranking meme that a lot of people see on the internet when it comes to gaming. You can use it to rank cereals, favorite foods, and everything like that. You'll notice that it starts with S. S stands for superb. So it's basically a level above A. And it comes from the Japanese, I believe it comes from the Japanese grading system. So in the US, it's like A to F, and in Japan starts with S. It just means you're a cut above everybody else. So this is like the elite or the superlative, like the best out there. And then F would be, the worst. But you know what? Maybe we should start with something a little bit easier just to like start the ranking. So something like, what do you think? Huh. What's an easy one?
I don't know. I think all this is going to just be like so subjective that I can't
Yeah, that's
imagine.
true. Yeah, I want to find Apple. And this is something I messed up on. I probably should have alphabetized it and then you see Apple
I
anywhere?
see.
Oh, there
Yeah,
we go.
Apple's like, there you go, little tiny thing.
Yeah. All right, where do we put Apple? This one's easy, in my opinion.
I mean, that strikes me as one of the most like design-led organizations. And so if I think about where I'd want to go, it's definitely a more mature organization. And I try to uh, operate at kind of growth companies. But I know that if I added Apple to my resume on top of the companies I already have, it's only going to help me in that perception game. So I'd probably rank that as superb.
Yeah, same here. I think the assumption is that if somebody has Apple on their experience or in their resume and you submit that to a hiring manager, 9 times out of 10, they're going to want to know more or say, let's start a conversation with this designer. So definitely, like have a hard time thinking of another company that's known for good designers. So, what else? Facebook. I think that's good. That's kind of hard, actually.
Yeah, I actually got an offer from Facebook and went to Airbnb instead. I think there's still like a degree of prestige to Facebook. It's still like, FANG company. And
Yeah.
so, you're still going to make good money there. You're probably still going to do interesting work because it's at scale to such an insane degree. So the level of complexity of problems you're going to face is really interesting. I think it's probably lost a couple steps than it was 8 years ago or something like that. So maybe like in between, like maybe like a B range for me.
Huh. Interesting. I was gonna say A, and I feel like it was pretty close in terms of good design at one point. Like definitely not S, but it does feel like there are more Facebook designers on the market. And I think just because there's more supply, it changes how people view Facebook designers. So it doesn't actually mean Facebook designers are any better or
Mm,
worse, but
they're
because
just
there's a
everywhere.
supply and demand. Not that they're everywhere, it's just that it's more likely you'll come across a designer with Facebook on their resume versus say Apple.
Yeah, yeah. The
So
brand name recognition is there.
yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
A, but now that I think you can talk me into a B
Like
in
in
this
the middle,
case.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we're actually quite harsh here, apparently. All
That
right.
doesn't bode well for most people on this list.
Yeah. What about Etsy?
Etsy's interesting. I mean, it's a brand name. I actually know some people have gone to Etsy. I think the reputation. What I love about this is I'm going into evaluating a lot of these companies without so much data, which is basically how most people make a snap judgment about a company. I would
Yeah.
probably rank that alongside Facebook in terms of being like a brand name. I think their design, is pretty mature. They're definitely known for some degree of craft. It's not quite like a super high up on the list, but it's probably around the Facebook mid A B range.
I know a few designers who work at Etsy and I really like their work. So I think that colors my interpretation quite a bit. And I think they're also a company that's a little bit harder to get into. They're known for a really good culture. So for me, I feel like it's an A. What do you think?
Sure, yeah, I'd be convinced that around the right area.
Let's put like a low A, if kind of halfway in between. Is there a company that you want to do next?
What about Dropbox? Dropbox is so interesting to me because I've been
Yeah.
watching them since 2014. So I've been watching them for 10 years.
Okay, I'm gonna go
Drop.
first for this one, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
go
Because
for
I
it.
feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
so I have a lot of respect for Dropbox. I love their product. It's just so clean, easy to use. It just hits all the marks for me as a designer. And the only thing that makes me feel like it's a little bit lower is because I've spoken to a few designers who worked there before, and some of them did not have nice things to say about that place. And that's colored my view of it a little bit. But from the outside looking in, because I feel like most recruiters, they don't know what the company is like, and they're kind of basing it off on what
Right.
other designers tell them and also how they interpret the product. So in terms of how they interpret the product, it's like an A for me. But based on what people have told me about it, it feels like a B at this point for me.
Yeah, I was going to say lower kind of B range. I also think the stock price really hasn't gone anywhere in 10 years. And I'm trying to figure out kind of what is the next, any company I'm going to join, like what does the next few years at least look like in terms of growth for the company, my compensation, the likelihood I'm going to be laid off, like any of these types of dimensions. And I feel like Dropbox has kind of like a strong core product in a lot of ways, but hasn't like expanded beyond a lot of those things. So I think you could do some interesting work. There's definitely a scale and a complexity thing that I find really attractive, but I kind of wonder about the direction of the business.
Where would you put it?
Probably the lower B range. Like it's got
Yeah.
a brand name and it's well known, but I'm like, what does the next 10 years look like for Dropbox? Not what does the last 10 years look like for Dropbox?
I'm I probably should be saying this because I just don't know enough about the space, but it felt like at one point that all the companies I was working at were using Box, like other file sharing tools, like either Google Drive, Box. Very few use Dropbox. Like it was just not secure enough for most large organizations. And I think that kind of hurt them a little bit. But yeah, I agree. Like B. Can we talk about Nvidia next? Because you mentioned stock price. And I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting.
Nvidia and Palantir are both really interesting from a stock price perspective right now.
Yeah. Where is Palantir? God damn it. Oh, why don't you talk a bit about Nvidia while I hunt for Palantir?
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
wait,
this is
put
one
it
of those
here.
companies that I would have totally written off, maybe unfairly, just a few years ago. And then with AI and the way that this is going, it does make it more attractive. You're like, okay, probably going to work on interesting things. I know they're known for their hardware in a lot of instances. So as a product designer, I'm thinking, what would I actually get in there and do? So I'd be very curious to understand what the day-to-day work would be like if I were to join that company. But I expect that the compensation would be good, and I expect that the stock price will continue to rise. That's no one invest based on this feedback at all. But it seems like the trajectory for the company is good. And so I'd be really interested in kind of learning more. And so it probably would have been one of those companies I would have ranked at like the D level a few years ago. And now, I was like, as a 90s chip producer, and I'm just like, not even think about it. Now I wonder, is there really an interesting opportunity there? And I'd probably bump it up to like maybe that upper B or lower A range alongside Etsy.
Around 8 or 9 years ago, I remember meeting an engineer who did computer vision at NVIDIA at a hackathon. And I kind of want to hit him up at this point, be like, are you just filthy rich?
Are you a billionaire?
Yeah, are
Be
you a billionaire
realistic.
at this
Are you a
point?
billionaire? Good bets.
Yeah. So, from a recruiting perspective, I feel like NVIDIA is not going to be known for really good designers. Just like my assumption, like I just don't know any designers from NVIDIA. So it's hard for me to imagine how whatever interfaces they're building would translate over well to, say, a startup, for example. And however, I do feel like in the next few years, the designers coming out of there, I'm going to assume are going to be pretty good because there are going to be a lot of designers who are like, yeah, I just want to make as much money as possible. And I'm going to go to NVIDIA. And because there's such a demand to work there, they're going to be able to hire more talented designers than in the past. So yeah, I would agree with you. I would say it was like a D or E years ago, but you can make the argument that it's gonna just go up from here. And say in 1 or 2 years' time, you can say, okay, somebody who started at NVIDIA in 2023 or 2024, they're gonna be pretty good. But these are all just assumptions. Like I don't think this is like logical.
Oh
Like
yeah,
don't quote me
this
on
is
it.
all
But
so subjective.
yeah.
I
So
think
what
I
do we
think
put?
there's an interesting point there about your friend, in that this has been the case with me as well. Is most of the companies that I've joined, like you listed at the beginning, as being prestigious, were not prestigious when I joined, right? And that's really where you end up having this prestige on your resume. Like DoorDash, when I joined, had 8 engineers. They had just raised a Series B. It was a very small company. It operated in 8 markets, and kind of some people knew it, most people didn't know it. And only kind of like through kind of assessing the opportunity and where it might go and getting really, really lucky do you end up being at this company. And I've literally had people at recruiting me be like, well, you're at DoorDash, it's a huge company. It's like, not when I joined though. It was very different. They don't look at me as a startup designer because DoorDash is so mature now. But it's interesting thinking about your friend who joined a not sexy company 8 years ago is now filthy rich probably. And this
Oh yeah.
company has all this clout that this person's like, yeah, I've been there for 8 years. And people are like, oh my gosh, you've been at NVIDIA for 8 years. Good move. That was the right call. Those right calls are never clear. And so I think that's what the tension is here. It's like you're trying to go to these sexy companies that have this brand already, which is not wrong, but also there's legitimacy into finding, almost like an investor, finding value in these places that are lower on this list, that are actually heading up this list. So that's why I feel like it's safe to kind of safely judge these in some instances, because it's not a, you can't, where something's at today has nothing to do with where it's going to go tomorrow. And, something unsexy on this list could be an awesome place to be for great work and great compensation in the future. So important lesson.
So this is very much a tangent, but I want to ask this question. I think this is important. So you've hit the trifecta, in my opinion, when it comes to going to companies at the right time before they become really popular. Because it's really easy right now to say, here are the companies I want to join today because they're already successful,
Right.
like NVIDIA or Etsy or Airbnb. But you did it at a time when most people who looked at it would be like, well, I don't know. This seems like a risky proposition. How did you figure out that Palantir and DoorDash were
Yeah.
going to be likely to become bigger than what they were before?
I mean, I would have never guessed about Palantir. I got lucky at Palantir because I knew someone who worked there, and they're like, we're hiring for designers. And this was back in 2012 or 2013, in kind of the golden days of, emerging from the housing crisis and the upswing in the beginning of this long bull market in America. And so that was like, I needed a job. I had moved to San Francisco and was doing freelance and had no money. And I needed something more stable. And a guy I met at a bar who became friends with was like, I work at this company, you should come work at this company. So it's just pure luck. And, it's business to government. It is not a sexy space necessarily. And now that they've started to pivot into AI, the stock price is through the roof, which is not a great indicator to look at. It's like a vertical climb on their stock price. And so that always makes me nervous as an investor. But I would have not predicted, even after I had left Palantir went public in 2020. I bought some shares, but I didn't expect that it would just totally blow up. So that was just pure luck. DoorDash, I got to interview with the founders. I reported to one of the co-founders when I first joined, and I just liked the problem they were solving, the level of complexity, and the way they thought about the problem in terms of, this is so much bigger than delivering French fries. If you can deliver French fries in 15 minutes and they're still delicious, you can deliver anything in the world in that amount of time. That complexity of the problem was what got me interested. And I realized that there is a huge opportunity there. And so that's what made me really curious about that space. So I've never actually joined a company for its prestige, and its projected prestige is so difficult. I'm always looking at, is the business these days, is the business going to survive until next year? Are there going to be layoffs next year? Am I going to do, mostly I indexed on, am I going to do really interesting work, because the problems are very complex. And so I've looked at those types of dimensions, and that's where I've kind of gotten lucky. I think it de-risks it in some ways, where if the company doesn't end up being prestigious, but you're doing really interesting, complex work, it's going to be a good portfolio piece. And then on top of that, if the company becomes prestigious, you're double lucky, right? But you've kind of hedged it if the prestige never really materializes, or not while you're there. At least you did interesting work that you can talk about in an interesting way.
All right. So I feel like you should sell consultation packages to designers. Like if I don't know which companies to apply for, or I have like multiple offers to choose from, I should hit you up and be like, hey Ryan, which one feels like the lucky number for you?
Yeah. I'm going to teach a course starting next year on kind of career strategy. I've always done the unintuitive step in my career, and it's led to good outcomes. So I'm working with Maven on creating a course sometime next year. So that'll be part of it, is how do we evaluate these companies and kind of project like an investor would, where do we think this is going to go, and how do we hedge our bets and where we decide to go. If you've got a great manager, you're doing complex work, both of those things are easier to assess. And then if it becomes prestigious, that's icing on the cake.
Awesome. Yeah, we should definitely hit you up for that later. And I noticed another comment by John. He said NVIDIA has Omniverse, which is like Figma for 3D animations. And he also mentions that may be more relevant for 3D tooling design. So that's a really good point. And I also want to mention that when we talk about these companies, depending on who the hiring manager is, that changes the calculation completely. So for example, if you're doing 3D stuff, then NVIDIA, Unity, that makes a whole lot of sense. That gets you bumped to an A or S. However, if it's not relevant, then less so. So we're kind of looking at it from a very average standpoint as opposed to very specific standpoints. And that's just not how it works in hiring at all. Like typically it's trying to find apples to apples comparison. So I'll also go back. Where does NVIDIA sit? C or D?
I was going to put it up towards like I was going to put it lower, much lower before. I'd put it up maybe in the B range right now because it's, and I think the other thing about this is if you're working in the AI space and you're at NVIDIA for some period of time, I feel like AI as a technology is only going to continue to evolve the same way as when we launched, the internet back in the 90s, right? Every company was like, yay, we added .com to our name. And now everyone views us differently. I think that's what companies are doing with AI right now. And a lot of companies haven't really figured out how to leverage AI as a technology the same way they didn't know how to leverage the internet as a technology. But the technology is here to stay, and it will be net useful once we kind of figure out the best ways to apply it. And so I feel like this is also one of those areas where the company's probably headed for continued success, but the industry overall, if you go to NVIDIA and you gain those skills and you become like an AI designer who was at NVIDIA for 4 years, you'll probably have your pick of a bunch of other AI companies that come out of the next 5 years. So for me, I'm looking at that, like also projecting that trajectory and what I can do as a next step. So I rank it a little bit higher. I feel like it would set me up.
All right. You've convinced
Depending
me.
on the project, depending on the team.
You've convinced me, and I feel like I just got a free career coaching session from you in the last few minutes. All right, let's do something a little bit juicy. Chase.
Chase is so interesting for me because I do all of my banking through Chase. So it's something I use. I was thinking about this last night on a regular basis. Although I feel like their product is okay. It's useful. I feel like it's utility, but I'm not really delighted by it. And I'm not really on Chase for their digital products. I'm there for a variety of other dimensions. I think I heard someone who's like the VP of Chase speak recently. So I would consider it as I think I would do a little more investigation into like how their design team is operating, how big the design team is, how they might be being leveraged by the company. I do feel like there's some correlation with financial organizations and designers who work at financial organizations. Actually, a lot of people who take my Describing the ROI of Design course come from financial organizations because those ones are most likely to be like, what's the return on investment of every single thing we do, including design? So it can be a little tricky to work in those environments sometimes. So I would probably rank it a C in terms of maybe has potential. If I were a candidate, I would probably take it somewhat seriously because of its brand name as a company. It's also not a core tech company. It's a finance company with a tech component, right, to serve their financial products. And so that is a factor for me too. Versus Apple is a tech company. Etsy is a tech company. I feel like Chase is a financial organization with a tech component. So that brings it down for me a little bit.
I agree with that. I believe they view design as a cost center, and even though their design team has been growing and definitely maturing, they're hiring a lot more ex-FANG people at this point. It still feels like doing design there is pretty hard. And yeah, it's hard to say because I know too many people at Chase at this point, and I have personal biases against them because I applied there a while back and they pulled my offer after they found my LinkedIn profile.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've not heard that before.
Yeah,
that's so weird to me. Wait a minute. They pulled your offer after they found your LinkedIn. Like looking at your LinkedIn wasn't the first thing they did. You got all the way to the offer and they hadn't looked at your LinkedIn yet.
I didn't get to the offer. So I should be clear in this. I didn't get the offer. However, I got to the last interview. You know how like you go through the final on-site?
Yeah. You're right there at the finish line.
Right. And then they schedule a 30-minute call. They say, oh, that was a great on-site. You did really well. And I went over the on-site by 2 hours because I had such a great time talking to one of the designers there. And then they scheduled the final like 20-30 minute call with the hiring manager. You know, the call where it's like, you did great. We just want to figure out what you're asking for so we can put the offer
Yeah.
together, gauging interest. And then an hour before that call was scheduled to happen, the recruiter called me and was like, "Oh, you didn't do well on your design, and like we didn't like your designs." I'm like, "Yep, I showed that in round two. We're in round like 5 now. Why didn't you tell me sooner?"
Yeah,
And
yeah. Sounds like BS.
and then I checked my LinkedIn profile and I saw they finally looked at my LinkedIn profile like an hour or two before. So
That's so
that's my
strange.
guess. That's my guess. Okay, what's another
That
company we can
that really
pick?
shows you how like non-linear this process is sometimes, and how weird and like things that are completely outside of your control can throw you off. I could share similar stories, but I won't. But it's so much of this, like getting accepted or rejected, is just a crapshoot, to be honest.
Yeah. Somebody says they want to see C's, D's, and F's. All right, let's try to hunt for one.
Oh man, if you go down to the bottom, I see a bunch of juicy financial organizations that I
So
would
mean.
pretty AIG. I'm like, oh god, like part of my association is with the company and its brand. I mean, this is what we're talking about, right? It's the company, its brand as a whole, and then
Yeah,
design as a component in that. And so when I think of
yeah.
like companies that don't have what, if you're thinking about from a growth perspective, like low NPS, any healthcare organization has a tendency to piss people off. Like any insurance organization or some financial organizations have a tendency to piss people off. So when you think about, I'm going to this brand and you're like, oh, I work at, XYZ health company, and someone on the other end of the hiring process is like, those guys just screwed me over on my bill. Like, it's not fair that that blows back on you, but I feel like to some degree that blows back on you. Everyone's like, there's like companies that are neutral. You're like, Zoom it could be better, but it's okay. It helps me. I don't know anything about Twitch because I'm not a gamer, but fuck those insurance guys. It's like, I feel like financial and insurance, it's maybe not fair, but it does come with this other brand and other stigma sometimes that might trigger people. So I look at those and I'm just like, that's, they're not going to leverage design. They're not really probably going to like understand technology, even because it's not a fundamental part of their business. And it's likely that someone else has had a bad experience on the hiring side with some of these companies. And so I feel like those wouldn't be great door openers if that's what we're trying to assess here. So probably a whole cohort of companies I'd put down at the bottom there.
So
Cigna, AIG, I see down here. Blizzard, I would put really low because I've heard so much. If this is all a branding exercise, right? I've heard so much about Gamergates and toxic work environments and different types of things. I wouldn't maybe judge someone like a designer who's come from Blizzard, but I personally wouldn't want to go there. I would feel like there'd be some brand risk on my resume potentially for some of those reasons. There's already this negative association or scandal with the company. Another one that's a good one, this has been in the news yesterday. Cruise just got shut down. And I actually had a student from Cruise who was there when there was a bunch of, I think GM just killed it. So when there's a scandal or something like that, I feel like that anytime there's a scandal that comes out, and maybe Facebook's a B now, but around the Cambridge Analytica era, I would have been boom, way down the list. So some of those I would look for like scandals in the news as a brand in a bad way. It works the other way around. Interestingly, the exact day that I was interviewing at Airbnb, DoorDash announced maybe like a Series D round of funding and became a unicorn. The exact day that I'm interviewing at Airbnb, they're like, didn't you guys just become $1 billion company? I was like, yes, we did, but I still want to work at Airbnb. And so like good or bad press can work for you in either direction. And so anything that's got bad press recently or has some kind of scandal, I'm going to stay really far away from it for at least a few years and wait to see how it all shakes out. Sometimes like Dropbox or Facebook, got Cambridge Analytica, goes down the list. They recover from that. People forget, they move on, and it kind of works its way back up. Cruise dropped off the list because GM just shut it down. So, it can go either direction.
let's do it this quickly then. AIG where?
I feel like these are all for me pretty safely like the EF range. I don't know how much I can like. It's all kind of like a below a threshold. I think there's a threshold of like no, I'm not going to go anywhere near that. Which is maybe not fair. I don't want to be unfair to people who work. Cruise isn't even on the list anymore. That company is like, they're shutting that stuff down.
Yeah, but
I don't want to be
no, we're
unfair
talking
to
about like
designers who work at these places, but
where would you put Cruise though? Like somebody with
Cruise,
ex-Cruise experience.
I think again, I probably if I were a recruiter or hiring manager, I'd probably be okay with that person. I would be okay with that person because they probably were solving really interesting problems. I think there's DoorDash was this way, Uber is this way, Cruise was this way, where there's this interesting intersection between digital and the real world. Airbnb is this way too. Like you click a button and you have to design where that button goes and what the flow is, etc. But then if you push order on DoorDash, it kicks off this whole real world experience of like now someone has to go physically drive to the restaurant and deliver the food, and there's all of this like end-to-end service design, experience design components to it. So I'd imagine Cruise would have some really interesting real world online to offline experience is what I call it. So I'd imagine they'd have a lot of real world implications in their product, for better or worse. So I think that's interesting actually to hear about and talk about. So if I saw someone come in from Cruise, which probably a lot of people are now, I would probably take them pretty seriously. They can't control what happens at the company. They can't control what the executives do. But I would think those are probably really interesting problems. So as a hiring manager, I say, yeah, someone from Cruise is probably in that like C range or B range. As a candidate, I would stay away from any company that has some kind of scandal because the company could be shut down or the stock price is going to go down, those types of things.
I want to say from a recruiting perspective, Cruise is like a B or C for me.
Yeah,
because they're working on interesting problems. Yeah, well, let's do that. And then, see, okay, this is the other question I want to ask you. So, do you evaluate DoorDash designers differently based on when they work there?
That's so interesting. I think you could pose that question for anyone like Airbnb. DoorDash is tricky. DoorDash is not very design led. And so I feel like where we were at when I first joined, I was like the fourth designer and 3 of us joined within a couple of weeks of each other. So we all started at the same time, has like absolutely no reflection on the scale of the team now at 100 and so people. I don't know. I think there is kind of generally, I don't know if DoorDash is the best example for me to evaluate, but I think in general, there is a difference between people who join at a company when it's 100 people and the people who join when it's 2,000 people. I think probably the people earlier on have a greater impact on the direction of the company and a greater impact on the direction of the product. I was the person responsible for bringing photography to DoorDash's consumer product, and it wasn't design how photos look. It was go source all of the photos, which was a really weird project for a designer to lead. And I was leading a team of like 80 people to bring photography to DoorDash. You only get those types of opportunities at the smaller stage companies. When you're at a larger stage company, the scope of your work is going to be more diminished potentially. It's going to be just, like more specific and go deeper on different things versus like have these huge things because the company isn't building things from 0 to 1 quite as much, or there's just more people involved in that process. So I think there's some correlation between earlier, you're going to get a lot bigger things potentially. It's a high risk environment. Who knows if that company is going to succeed, but you'll have a lot of stories from it. The alternative, though, the counter argument here is if you go to Facebook and you're working on something that affects billions of people, it's a different type of scale and it's a different type of impact you're having. So there's impact either ways, but I do think earlier stage is potentially different than later stage in some ways.
I think from a recruiter's perspective, there's no difference. So anybody who's worked at Apple or Airbnb at any point, they're all relatively the same, even though somebody who's worked in Apple in the last 2 years, probably very different from say 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, so, yeah. I mean, Apple's been around for so long as a company that, that's just a different era entirely. And the company, what's interesting about that is those companies like Apple have reinvigorated and reinvented themselves multiple times. Like the Apple of 40 years ago, or the Microsoft of 40 years ago is not the Microsoft today. The company has evolved. And so there's almost like this cycle where the company keeps evolving. And are you at the early stage of the next evolution of the company is very different. So maybe that's why it kind of nets out for you.
Where do we put Activision Blizzard?
I put it pretty low on the list. I just don't have a very good association with that brand as a whole. Yeah. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
fair. None of this. The point is, none of this is fair. Like this is
Yeah,
all like
it's
snap judgments with no real data, and we're talking through how we'd evaluate some of these things. But almost all of this evaluation is done with more care, even though these are snap judgments. I literally had a recruiter a few months ago look at my resume like in front of me, and I'm running my own business and it's been successful and I'm very happy doing it. They're like, that just looks like bullshit freelance because I don't know the company. I was like, wow, that's that is
that's
extremely
harsh.
snap judgment. So a lot of this is not going to feel fair, but that's kind of how it works.
I think from a recruiter's perspective, when you talk about Activision Blizzard, it's hard to imagine how that translates to the average company. So if you're working in gaming or hiring a gaming role, then yeah, that makes perfect sense. That bumps it up to an A perhaps. But it's hard to imagine how the UI or the designs you're building for these games would translate over to something like B2B software or a mobile interface. So I would probably put it like around E. That's okay. What's an F? I have some
Man, some
thoughts.
some of these I don't even know. So if it's I guess it's interesting. Like, are the S's and A's and B's going to help you? And is this like an NPS where then like D is neutral and F and it's going to hurt you, or is F like is just not going to help you in any meaningful way? Because there's some here I don't know at all, and so I don't have like I have a negative association maybe with Cigna as a company, but I don't even know what like Granger is, and so it's just not going to do anything for me. Um, and so that's one of
Yeah.
those ones. It's like that's kind of like a neutral. I'm not moved in either direction. Versus some of these, I'm like, I don't judge the people based on the company, but I look at the company a certain way.
What's worse to you than Activision, Cigna, and AIG? Because that's now the barometer.
Oh no. Um, a lot of these I feel pretty positive towards or I've heard of in a good way. I think some of the ones I don't like, just don't know of. I don't know. I'm having a hard time saying because where it goes back to is some of these variables. Like, what is the complexity of the projects you're working on? Like, I wouldn't think of Verizon, for example, as it's a well-known company. It's probably not like as a core a tech company as Google, for example, right? But that doesn't mean you're not doing really interesting things there, and you're not having impact. It doesn't mean that it is a brand name company that I'm familiar with. So I think some of the ones that are harder for me are like Granger. It's like I'm just not sure what that is. So, and that's just on me. But there would just be companies I don't know, and
You
then
don't
it
know
doesn't
Granger?
really help. I don't off the top of my
I love
head.
Granger.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
They have these giant books of tools that you can buy at a pretty good price. So if you're a contractor, then Granger is like right up your alley. But
okay,
what about,
yeah, I'm not very handy, so you're seeing my tech side of me. I'm not I'm not a hands-on builder. I'm a digital builder.
All right, there are companies
What's an
known
F
for
for you,
objectively.
Hank?
I think there are companies that are known for objectively bad design. Like I wouldn't even blame the design team because I know that there are talented designers who work there who are they're working their asses off,
Yeah.
and there are institutional blockades or barricades that prevent them from doing visually good work or good interaction work. I still think they're doing really good work in terms of stakeholder management and change management and trying to improve the design maturity of the company. They're probably doing really good research, but it's not being exhibited or shown in the end product, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think ADP is definitely up there. It's like, down there, unfortunately. Like there are plenty of really good designers there that I know and
not
I
being
have
able to do
respect
good
for.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think recruiters are not going to feel like, oh, if you work at ADP, we need to bump you to the top of the list. And they're probably going to have maybe a little bit more negative connotations, unfortunately. But again, like, I've worked at these kind of companies before. They're just not known for good design, but you can still do really good work there and you can still elevate your career and grow and everything like that. So it's hard, but I'm sorry, ADP people.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that has led me to this kind of point in my career and the problems I'm trying to solve with the like teaching and coaching that I'm doing is there are so many designers that are held back from like we don't control like the quality of our work, right? If a PM cuts scope or the business just moves in a different direction or whatever, like whatever work we're able to do is so dependent upon all these other variables we don't control. And so you could be this amazing designer at ADP who's not allowed to do good work. And so that is it's a huge problem, I think, for our industry. And one of the things I'm trying to like personally help people through, because it's brutal to like know that you could do more, and then the organizational structure around you is not going to allow that. So yeah, I'd agree with that. As a company, not a judgment on the designers there, but as a company, I can see that being a very difficult place to produce high quality work.
Atlassian. I think this one's an interesting one.
I don't know about Atlassian. I feel like that's so interesting. I like the barf face this person included.
Yeah.
I actually know people at Atlassian, and I think they're doing good work. I know some of the leaders there. I've known some companies. I interviewed at some companies that got acquired by Atlassian. I don't have a strong negative association with Atlassian. I'm definitely not the barfing face that's being presented here by this blessed LinkedIn user. I would say maybe like a kind of at that like B- range, maybe. It's a legitimate tech company. It's a legitimate brand. They have offices in Australia, and Australia is cool. And I know leaders there, and so I would probably take it like pretty seriously. They're known for their engineering tools more than anything else, but I don't know. I think that I would assume their designers there are doing good work.
I agree with that. It's a tough one because from a designer's perspective, their tool is so difficult to use and it doesn't look great. But you can't argue with the fact that pretty much every single company you work at is going to use Jira. So
yeah,
that's tough.
I mean, that's the thing is we're not the target audience, right? And so it's a part of the assessment is like, but their target audience loves their product, and they're kind of ubiquitous. They've got an insane degree of product market fit. And I do know some of the leaders there are like pushing design forward. And so this is one of those companies that I'd probably look at as moving in the right direction, that it might be today, or my perception is probably based on yesterday. And where I think they're probably going is up this list, not down this list, if we're thinking about direction. So I take Atlassian a little more seriously.
B?
Yeah, probably here. But if I were someone interested in going to a company that was going to probably move up, that would be one that people wouldn't expect necessarily, that would be worth considering.
I would say Atlassian was a C or D for me a few years ago.
Yeah.
And what's changed my mind, and this is again not logical, very biased, is because David Huang, I can't pronounce his
that's what I'm
last name,
thinking
he's
of.
Asian. Yeah, he joined Atlassian not too long ago, and I have a ton of respect for him, right? So if you're a recruiter and you look at other design content creators, David's up there. Like he writes stuff, he gets engaged, he's giving talks at Hatch and other conferences. And if he's joining that company, you automatically assume, okay, this company cares about design. That's the caliber of designers they're hiring. So, I mean, I haven't seen any proof that Atlassian is good for, like getting better in design, but just that kind of social proof elevates it in my mind. And
well,
again,
I think it's
not logical.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's he was the head of design at Webflow for a while too, and David is the one I was thinking of. That is another really interesting dimension. If I were a candidate assessing the trajectory, which I think is so important, of the company, but also of design at the company, it's somewhat social proof. Like if David joins, I'm like, okay, he's seeing something and I respect him. But also, you only bring on someone who is really good at design if you want to continue moving in that direction, right? It would make no sense to hire David and then put a glass ceiling on top of him and not let him perform. And so I'm going to make some assumption that that is a signal that the company is bringing on people who are very capable because they want to move in a certain direction, which is up this ladder. And what you're saying is it was C or D, and you can already see this in your perspective, C or D, and it's moved up in part because they've hired David. And I think that's a fair assessment. And David only joined pretty recently. And so I don't think we'll see the impact of that hire maybe on the like brand scale for like probably a couple years. But that's where I'm looking where the puck is going, which is in a couple years, I think the status of this organization will be higher, and it already is, in my mind, higher than it was a couple years ago. So that's why I'd assess them that way, and I'd expect their trajectory to be moving in a certain way.
So all the ex-Atlassian designers need to thank David for elevating their candidacy in the eyes of recruiters and hiring managers at this point.
That's such an interesting point too. It's like where you were a couple years ago. Like Palantir didn't have this. I mean, it had some credibility because it was backed by like legit VCs back in the day and stuff. But I don't think it's it's probably not a brand name in some ways, but it is in others. But I was there for like a year 10 years ago and it helps my career now because of where the company is going. It's like you planting seeds in your career and they may continue to grow even when you're not there. Like DoorDash has just like exploded after the pandemic. And I get to take advantage of that. And it has nothing to do with what I did there. So yeah, sometimes you get lucky and the company moves and you get to reap the benefits years later, which is probably one reason I care so much about that trajectory angle.
Where do you put PayPal?
Probably pretty mid, I think, like well known. But I
Okay.
think I would, if I were to compare financial organizations, I would put Stripe much higher than PayPal. I feel like PayPal as a company has been around for a long time. I'm not really sure what direction they're heading or where they're innovating. Um, Versus Stripe has just like kind of hit the market in a really significant way. And so I'd probably put PayPal at like kind of the C range
Yeah.
along Chase.
Yeah.
Older
I agree with
school
that.
kind of financial organization.
I would say they're better than Chase though.
I think so. I was just thinking about that is that they are a tech company. Chase, I feel like, is a financial company with a tech component. PayPal is a proper tech company. So I think it's
Yeah.
kind of in that range, but it's tech centric versus tech adjacent. And I think that makes a big difference for me because I'm going to be on that technology team and I want tech to be as central to the business model as possible. Otherwise, it will be a cost center. And the problem is if like product engineers are already seen as a cost center, design is like a degree removed from that. And so I if I went to Chase, it's like, okay, where is design on the pecking order? It's like, okay, all of our financial guys are the highest priority, and then the tech team, and then design is a subset of that. I'm not going to have a lot of like credibility in that organization. And so that's something that I'd rank PayPal a lot higher because it's more tech centric. And design is still probably under product when it comes to the pecking order in that organization, maybe.
Always.
But PayPal as a company would be above Chase for that reason.
Now do Venmo.
Venmo I rank even higher potentially.
Okay.
I would rank it as like, yeah, that kind of above PayPal in that lower tier, maybe next to Dropbox. I take Venmo a little more seriously than Dropbox. I feel like Dropbox as a business is kind of
Oh.
has kind of stagnated, but Venmo, I see it doing really interesting things. And it's a consumer product. One thing that does make a difference, like I told people, I worked at Salesforce. It's funny, Hank, because you didn't even mention my background at Salesforce. You said Airbnb and you mentioned Palantir, but you mentioned
Yeah.
Airbnb and DoorDash. And those are two I play up on my resume because it's
Yeah.
consumer and everyone's basically used it. And if you used either of those products, you've seen my work and you are familiar with my work already. And so there is a little bit more clout, I think, towards consumer brands that people will have actually used. When I was like telling my family, I'm going to work for Salesforce, they're like, what is that? And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But so I think, PayPal is more consumer, Chase is consumer, and Venmo's consumer. And so there is that, but there's that ranking of which is more like a quote unquote, this is unfair, but true tech company. Venmo is more prolific, I think, than PayPal these days in terms of market share on the consumer side. So I actually personally use PayPal or Venmo all the time. I don't use PayPal at all. So my association with Venmo as a person is that's extremely useful in my personal life. And I take the brand seriously and I really like the brand. And so people who come from there, I'm going to associate with that company a little bit. So there's a difference between B2B and B2C, I think, for some of those reasons.
So I find it really interesting that Venmo, I think, is universally ranked higher than PayPal. Pretty much anyone you ask as a designer, they would say so, even though PayPal owns Venmo. And I would argue that PayPal's design challenges are more difficult than Venmo's design challenges. And also, PayPal has changed in the design side more so than Venmo has in the last few years, in my opinion. So I feel like logically, I would actually put PayPal above Venmo in some ways. But from a recruiting perspective, it's like not even close. It's like, yeah, Venmo's definitely higher up. And that's the kind of the dissonance that I struggle with a bit. Like, why do I feel this way? But I think a lot of my assumptions are probably not even rooted in reality at this point.
PayPal is interesting. I think if you look at Rachel Kobetz too as like one of the true kind of chief design officers held up in the industry, I'd be interested to see where PayPal's going based on their leadership. That could be something that's lower down that moves up in the future if Rachel is able to pull it around.
Yeah, that is true. She's also posting a bit more on LinkedIn, so I think she's gonna, more people know about her at this point than.
Yeah, that's interesting. The credibility of that leader, and then you're at that company, like you're kind of leveraging the credibility the company has and the trajectory that person has. But if we look at Atlassian and PayPal, it's like I know those leaders, and I'm paying attention to them and what they're doing and how credible they are in the industry. And so there's a little bit of probably some like prestige leverage there as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I've been picking other companies. I feel like the selfish kid who's like always hawking the controller. Is there a company that
Do you want to do like a lightning like round?
let's
I've got
do
a hard
that.
stop in 9 minutes. I'm actually teaching, doing a Q&A with my product management students in 9 minutes, but let's throw some around. So I think Airbnb, I'm going to be biased, but I think everyone agrees that's going to be up in that like higher level category,
Yeah.
down a little bit, down here to your left, right there, up, right, warmer.
Why can't I
colder.
see it? Why can't I see it?
Down,
oh my God.
down a little bit.
Oh,
right there.
no,
Oh my gosh, it's like playing hot and cold with my kids.
all
Nike,
right.
actually, okay, you pick one and I'll pick one, and we'll just go really fast.
All right. Nike.
I'd probably put it on that like A/B range, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like it's a B for me. It's like a solid B, but
also their marketing work is always pretty strong, and I feel like that's part of my association is how strong their stuff is.
Yeah. Coinbase.
Maybe a B range.
Yeah, I want to say A to B. You know
Yeah?
what? Yeah,
I don't know much about their team.
I feel like when they exploded, that's when everybody was like, "Oh my God, Coinbase," and then they went back down a bit. So that's probably how we feel about it. But
Yeah.
what's your next pick?
Stripe, I would probably put. It's interesting because I have such a strong positive association with the brand Stripe.
Yeah.
I think the quality of their product is pretty good for the level of complexity they're having to deal with. It makes things pretty accessible. It's kind of right in the middle, right below IBM, a couple below IBM, next to Webflow.
Oh, there we go.
I'd put them probably in that like upper B or lower A range, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of complexity, but they're doing a good job of making it clear.
I don't know a whole lot about Stripe. I don't use it for any of my tech stack, and for some reason, I just always assume their designers are really good. I don't even know why. I just do, and yeah, no idea. But Gusto, I think that's a good one because they're pretty big. Everyone knows about them.
This is one of those companies where I feel like their design quality is okay. Like I look in their products and I'm like, okay, like you got illustrations, you got color. It's it's nice. There's a system, I can tell. And I just struggle with their product based on their product and their brand based on like its HR. And I have mostly negative association with HR. So I'd probably put that as it's unfair because of my personal biases and associations, but I'd probably put that as like a lower. It's a legit brand name. I guess that's not fair. I would probably put it in the C range, like with Cruise. I feel like those are both like legit in a lot of ways, but I just like no. Okay, tell me why.
PayPal is better than Gusto, in my opinion.
Okay.
And God, because we know people. Femke, I'm so sorry, Femke.
Just do it. Be brutal. Put it where you got to put it, man.
Look, I feel like PayPal is a level above from a recruiting standpoint than Gusto. Unless you're in the payments HR system space, then it's hard for me to say that. But yeah,
Heng, where would you put DoorDash? I'm super curious about the external view on DoorDash. It's right next to Miro to the left of IBM there.
All right. From a recruiting perspective, I want to give it an A. Mm-hmm. But as a user of it, I like Uber Eats way more. It's so confusing for me. It comes across as one of those Chinese or East Asian apps where they just like put in too much stuff. There's too much like right scrolling for me. And there's like both vertical and horizontal scrolling, which I just personally don't like. So that's kind of a personal bias. But I have a hard time navigating DoorDash's interface versus Uber Eats. Like if there's an
Hmm.
issue, I have a hard time resolving that, like a harder time. And
Hmm.
finding restaurants, if if I weren't a recruiter, I would just based on the product itself, I would say like a B or a C.
Hmm.
But as a recruiter, I would say that's going to get your foot in the door. Even
Yeah.
though, yeah, I just feel like it's a pretty solid A for me. Definitely a bit above Etsy and Stripe.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right. I feel like the product, because I joined and the product was so austere, and they've just put a lot of features in there, and I think there's a tension between a lot of those features which you're getting to. So from a design quality standpoint, I feel like B, pretty solid B. But from a company branding standpoint, I mean, it's hard for me to assess because it's my own company, but it seems like it's got a lot of clout for just how successful the business has been, which is definitely a factor that's going to impact you as a designer, which is or
Yeah,
isn't fair.
yeah. I was gonna choose
Oh,
Envision next.
Envision. Does Envision still exist? I think that says everything.
Yeah. God, what do I pick next? Amazon. I think that's a good one.
That's hard for
It's a
me. I
Fang.
feel like I know it's a Fang. For me personally, like that's got to be maybe a B minus or a C, because I know it's
Yeah.
going to be so product led and so data oriented. It's going to be so difficult. A lot of their interface hasn't changed for a long time. I feel like this is the company that just A/B tests everything to death, and then you look at it together and you're just like, this is a mess. So I'm sure everything's hyper optimized, but what room does that leave for like design to have a very large seat at the table? Um, I think that for me, as a candidate, I'd be like, I'm not going to probably be able to do high craft work here, and I wouldn't expect high craft work to come from a company that's so operationally and data heavy.
Yeah, but like I would say PayPal has better design than Amazon, but Amazon has more clout than PayPal does in terms of
That's
resume.
true. That's true. Yeah,
It's so strange,
I
but
would agree with that. I think they're a high degree of craft at PayPal, but the scale of Amazon is so huge that affects.
you got to teach a class soon. We have 2 minutes left. Do you want to just hop out so you have like a minute to reset?
Sure. Do you want to do one more? I'm curious
Yeah.
about. Let's see. I want to test Hang and see where. Now I get to see what Hang thinks about a company. I'm interested on your perspective on Miro and Canva
All
as
right.
like design
Fuck.
tools. What if we did Canva, Miro, and like Figma? I'm very interested in your three assessments of those three like design heavy tools.
Yeah. I would say
Because
Miro's up there, but see, that's not really fair because I know too many people from Miro and also they're based in Europe. So out of European brands, I feel like Miro's like top there. Like Zalando, Miro, they're like in Europe, I would say they're S. In
interesting,
the
yeah.
US, I want to say it's like low A or high B. And then Canva, I know so little about it that I have no logic behind this. I'm just gonna throw it as a C. I feel safe there. And then Figma, it's an S for me.
Oh
It's
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like if you have Figma on your resume, you can pretty much go anywhere you want afterwards. And I don't know why I'm saying that, but that's my feeling. I feel like if you go to a hiring manager, it's like, oh, this person's ex Figma, they're gonna be like, yeah, let's interview them.
Yeah, because every designer knows Figma and uses Figma, and so yeah, there's a familiarity there that's pretty high
Yeah.
for our
Do
industry.
you
If you go to a bunch of others, yeah, I think that looks right. Miro kind of in the middle, Figma a little bit higher because it's so ubiquitous, and Canva lower, for sure. That sounds right to me.
all right. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Ryan. This has been a lot
Yeah,
of
thank you for
fun.
having me. I've never done anything like this before. And I think the last point I want to leave for everyone is so much of this is subjective, so much of this is unfair. It is just a weird way this industry operates. And there's things you can do by like, if the brand name isn't there, if you're doing great work and you can talk to the great work that you're doing, like you can definitely, just because you haven't worked at like a company doesn't mean you can't get in to some of these companies. I mean, I was coming from DoorDash, which was really small, going to Airbnb. I was just able to talk about the work. People knew DoorDash, but it wasn't an A at that point in time. So it's all about how you talk about the work and how you sell the work and how you talk to the company about what they need and what you can bring to the table based on what problems you've solved and how you're going to solve those types of problems for that company. So this is definitely one of those things that you've got an S or an A on your resume. It's going to grease the wheels, but that doesn't make it impossible. And honestly, I would, if I were looking for a job, I would not be going to probably the S's or A's. I'd be looking for a B or C that's moving up, either in market share or in stock price or in design maturity. I'd be looking for the trajectory of a company to join, because that's the wave I want to ride more than anything.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This has
Awesome.
been a lot of fun. I'm going to still be
Thanks,
around
everyone.
for another half an hour, so I'm going
Yeah.
to do
Feel
this
free to
really
connect
quick.
with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch with anyone.
Yeah, and check out his Maven courses as well. Thanks so much.
All right. See y'all.
See you around. All right, so it's just me now, and I'm gonna do it really quickly. If anybody has any recommendations or call out name, I'll try to I'll do it. So I know somebody mentioned Shopify earlier. This is hard because I do know a few Shopify designers, and I think they're really talented. And they were higher at one point due to their stock price, but they had to do a lot of layoffs as well in the last year or two. So that's tough. I want to say Shopify is a low B. That's my guess. Do IBM. Do you work there, Anna? You probably work at IBM, so this is tough. But so when I see IBM, I think of Tony Mora. That's just I don't know why. That's like the only designer I know from IBM. And IBM is interesting because they're one of the few companies I know of that don't require designers to be really good at visual design. And they've been around for a long time as well. So I think designers who work there tackle pretty complex problems, but I don't think IBM helps a lot for your resume in this day and age. Now, back in the 70s and 80s, I think if you worked at International Business Machine, people are like, whoa, you are awesome and amazing. I'm so sorry, Tony. I'm so sorry. Please don't block me. Yeah. And Lowe's. I'm gonna do Lowe's because Nadia works there and Heath works there, and I like them both a lot as people. I'm gonna put them in a D. Yeah, I know. Great design thinking practice at IBM. It's true. I think they do things the right way oftentimes, but again, from a purely recruiter's perspective around how likely you would be able to get through the early interview rounds, just like right off, just based on name alone, I don't know if IBM is really up there. I'm so sorry. Yeah, but anyway, IBM, Lowe's, I'm gonna put them in a D. Ford, again, I know. Oh, God, this is so painful because I know people who work there. I want to say Ford is a C. Part of it is just so hard because Ford doesn't like when you think of Ford, you think of the cars. There isn't. It's not like you can think of some kind of interface from Ford. Like it doesn't pop into your head. You don't think of a design really. And I know they're tackling a lot of really interesting challenges because pretty much every car nowadays has a built-in screen and monitor, and there are a lot of complex challenges in making sure that users are operating the screen and interface in a responsible way so that you're not causing crashes because they're confused by touch screens. So I know this is super tough. You need to be a really good designer to be working at Ford to solve these problems because real lives are at stake versus a lot of these other companies where if you screw up, like people get inconvenienced and they get annoyed, but nobody dies or gets hurt. And at Ford, that can actually happen because automobile deaths is like one of the highest rates of injuries and cause of deaths in the United States. So it's up there, but they're a C for me. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't want to do McDonald's. Spotify. I think for Spotify, for me, it was an S at one point. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they're a low A or maybe a high B. But, their design is good. I think the recent Spotify Wrap was disappointing, but I don't think that's gonna really affect recruiters. Ford. How would you rank between Rivian and Tesla next to Ford? I don't know anything about Rivian, but I think they're really cool. Tesla is, oh, that's a tough one because I used to own a big portion of my portfolio was in Tesla stocks at one point, and and I used to really like the brand, even though I don't know how to drive. By the way, I live in New York City and I'm in my 30s. I don't know how to drive, and it's an issue. But I always had like really positive predisposition toward Tesla until in the last several years. I think the comments about the kids that were trapped in the soccer team that was trapped in the Thai cave, that like pushed it down for me. But you can't deny that the interface for Tesla cars, it's pretty good. Like it's not the greatest in terms of usability, but it looks really cool. And you can't deny the fact that when you get into a Tesla car, it's a different feeling than getting into a Ford and other cars. So I want to say it's higher up, but uh, it's like a high C or a mid B for me. But also, I have a lot of respect for people who like survive at Tesla. Like you gotta have nerves of steel. Notion, Zapier, Slack, Gong. Oh, come on, that's a lot. Okay, so I'm gonna do this pretty quickly. I think, I fucking love using Notion. It's like one of my favorite tools to use. And I know a lot of work went into the interface to make it that simple, but it's also not like the flashiest app out there. So I think most people who look at it don't think of good design, even though I do think a lot of good design went into it. I want to say the design skill set, it's like an A, but from a recruiter's perspective, like if you're a non-design like if you're a design recruiter who's never done design work before, then you might not appreciate Notion as much as I do. So yeah, I wanna put it up there in the A category, but I can imagine most recruiters would be like maybe a B. I don't know if that's fair. Slack. No, that's interesting. I haven't heard that in a while. It's here somewhere. I know I've seen it. I'm like blind. That's what I've learned from this exercise. I can't. There's another Tesla. I put in two Tesla logos. There's another Ford as well. So that's how much work, how much preparation I put into this. Instagram. I want to say it's up there. It's like no, it's an S. Has to be an S. It's so well known. I think if you have Instagram on your resume, you're set for life. What else? We got Gong, Goog. Is it Google or Gong? I'm gonna assume it's Google. Google used to be the top. I would say Google was like here before. I want to say they're here now, and I don't really have a lot of justification. It's just like gut feeling. What else? HubSpot. HubSpot. I don't know a lot about HubSpot. No, wait, I do. I've seen their interface before, but not like never used it. I've zero experience with it. I want to say here, and I'm probably gonna get killed for this, but that's just how I feel. I can't really defend it, so leave me alone. Zapier. I know Zapier because I've used the product before. It's good. It's like a decent product. I didn't like use. It's good enough. And when I think of Zapier, I think of Bonnie Dilber, who's a recruiter there, and she's like very prolific on social media. Yeah, like a solid C. I want to say below. It's the brand prestigious if you can't find a sea of logos. Now that's just logo design. Doesn't I don't think that's like prestige even. So yeah, Netflix ranges. Where are they? Netflix. I don't think Netflix has the best design, but I know it's super prestigious. They pay so much money. And I want to say it's like better than Google. It's like around here. It's definitely a solid S, but I can't justify it logically. But it is a solid S. I don't know why. It's a gut feeling. Don't repeat this. culture is tanking. Yeah, I mean, like we all heard rumors here and there. I can see that. I think like most companies, their cultures are tanking right now. Splunk, ooh, that's fun. Oh wait, here's Slack. Somebody said Slack earlier. I would say Slack is like it's an A. Slack is hard because when Slack first came out, it was like the best designed messaging tool ever, right? And I still use Slack. I still love it. I think it's really well designed. Now, my problem with Slack is that in the last 5 years, if you show me Slack from 5 years ago versus now, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Whereas if you show me Airbnb from 5 years ago or Figma from 5 years ago, I could like easily tell the difference. Like there's substantial changes and improvements. And Slack, I just haven't seen that. I like them enough that I bought their stock, and it worked out well for me. But yeah, like I would still say it's like a, low A for me. So I'll leave it at that. Uh, yeah, heard that as well, but you know, at one point they were just known for really good design. Like, there's no way to deny it. It was like a high bar of craft. It was like everything. They just pay so much attention to everything. So I like Slack. Uh, agree with Prestige. Yeah. Chipotle. Yeah. I used to love Chipotle before I stopped eating meat, and I bought their stock, and I lost so much money in Chipotle. It was painful because they had so many like outbreaks of E. coli and stuff. And I know during the pandemic, and even before then, they had like a new CEO. They improved their like online ordering system just in time for COVID. So I know that's like difficult design challenges and stuff, but I don't think designers really drove that initiative. I know I put in Chipotle as like a joke somewhere. Oh, here it is. I want to say sorry. No, not an F, but yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking blind. Splunk. Somebody has to tell me where everything is, even though I made this and put this here. Splunk. I want to say it's like no, it's like it's a tech company, and yeah, I want to say this. I'm tempted to put it over here, but I think you can convince me to be like a C. All right, Asana, Webflow, and Framer. Framer, ooh, I think Framer's up there. Like a lot of designers are using them for their portfolio, so people already know about them at this point. I think the interesting thing is like Framer versus Squarespace, and I don't know where the fuck I put Squarespace. It's here somewhere. Ooh, PTC. I'm just gonna put this over here. Francis would enjoy this. And leave it over here. I'm not even gonna talk about them. Fuck them. Uh, Splunk. Yeah, what was I doing? I forgot what I was doing before. I forgot what the fuck. Oh, Asana, Webflow, and Framer. Webflow. I can't even find Webflow. Oh, here it is. So Webflow, I think it's lower than Framer. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna say that. And even though David came from Webflow and Sarah Tajima came from Webflow, and I get a lot of respect for them, I want to say they're a solid B. And also, I used the product and I hated it. Like, I think it's really powerful. It'll do everything you want it to do, but their payment system was so confusing. Like, you have to like buy separate tiers. Like, there isn't like a single tier for all your pricing. It was like you had to buy this module and then this module to do something you wanted to do. So I just gave up after a month. I was like, fuck this shit. It's not worth it. Like, I'm just gonna clobber some stuff together and make it happen. And I ended up using Squarespace. So yeah, this is, I can't even find Squarespace. I'm gonna skip on that for now. OpenAI. 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 It's like along with Linear. I think that's going to be really interesting to talk about. But I can't even find OpenAI. I don't know if I even put it on here. I should have because that's a big one. So I'm just gonna pull up the logo separately. All right, OpenAI A has to be A. I mean, sorry, S has to be S right now. And there's no data behind this. I don't know. I don't know any OpenAI designers. I just assume there aren't that many of them. But it's just like such a well-known and hot and like sexy company right now. Oh God, it's so weird calling companies sexy. Shouldn't weird. But don't cancel me for this. But OpenAI, I feel like if you have that in your resume, you can go anywhere you want. I don't even think their design is that great. It's just that they're setting the paradigm for how we use AI. And that's a lot of responsibilities. And you do need a lot of skills for that. So I shouldn't say that design is bad or it's not great because I don't even understand. I can't even comprehend the kind of challenges they have to deal with because it is truly a 0 to 1 initiative where you're doing something that's never been done before, really, and trying to productize that and make that a user interface. So, like, definitely above, I think it's like on Apple level at this point. It's kind of crazy. Like, there's no comparison between Airbnb design versus OpenAI design. Like Airbnb and Apple designers are the work they produce, the output is at a exponentially better quality than what you would get from using OpenAI. I'm not saying that designers are better. I'm just saying that the amount of like craft and work and the stuff that goes behind it is so much higher. But the prestige for OpenAI is so high right now that I have to say they're maybe the top of everyone in S. And yeah, that's tough. But I feel like I actually defend this. So if you want to like come at me later and like argue with me about this, I'll do it. Somebody else mentioned Discord earlier. Discord. I don't use Discord. I use Slack because Discord is very confusing for me because I'm old and stupid. But I feel like if you work at Discord, that's pretty good for your resume. So I'm gonna say it's like almost as good as Notion. I think it's like on par with Spotify. So I'm gonna move Spotify up a little bit. I don't know if that's fair. I think DoorDash and Framer are like similar, so I'm gonna do that. That is awful, Hang. Which part? Because I've said so many awful things in the last 10 minutes. I don't even know. You got to be more specific, like which awful thing I said so that I can respond to that. Thank you very much, Sean. All right. I forgot Hotjar existed. They were bought by Content Square. Yeah, Hotjar. I don't. Yeah, they were really big at one point, but they're just like, we forgot about them. I wanted to Sonos because I do like their product. I mean, I did like their product, but they've since really fucked things up for a lot of people. So I'm gonna put them down here. This is very, very much biased. Ooh, Figma. I already have Figma. Oh, God, I'm so pathetic. I'm not like doing doubles of everything. Oh, Zillow's good. Zillow's a good one because I used to have a pretty low opinion of Zillow. And I would say they're like a D for me, even though they're probably one of the better real estate operations or apps out there. But then met Ha Fan, who works at Zillow, and she was telling me about like all the stuff that she's working on and how cool it was. So again, this is like the same thing with Webflow, where if you know a design leader there and you respect them, you're like automatically bump them up. Oof. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely like for me above PayPal, probably on the same as like Amazon now. So like just Ha Fan alone, single-handedly is like uplifting Zillow. So Zillow, I mean, ex Zillow designers, yeah, you gotta thank Ha for my opinion. But I will definitely have you later for that one. Yeah, GitHub, GitHub. Oh God, I have a lot of opinions about GitHub design, but I'm not a developer, so I should just shut the fuck up. But I do think that if you have GitHub on your, I always get them confused, GitLab and GitHub. I can't find GitHub, but Fuck, I just pull up the designs elsewhere. And I would say GitHub, I want to put it in, it's a tech company, so you gotta give them that. Yeah, somewhere around here. Feel good about this. All right, any other names? Oh, Uber. I think Uber. I want to do Uber. Uber's coming back because their stock tanked for a long time, but they somehow are finding profitability. And I never thought this was possible for gig drivers or gig workers. And the fact that they somehow managed this is pretty impressive. But I do worry about like how exploitative this has to be in order to pull a profit. And ex Uber designers, where do I put them? I want to say A. Like definitely not as good as Notion. Probably on par with Etsy. I want to say that. All right, what else? Zoom versus Loom. Ooh, Zoom. I want to say here. Yeah, I think Zoom is up here. Their product, it has just ballooned. It's so massive at this point, and it's still usable, so that's impressive. Loom, for me, Loom was up here. Like at one point I felt like Loom, if you're ex Loom, is like pretty awesome, but then the valuation tanked. They got bought up at a pretty steep discount for where they were before. So at one point, Loom was above Zoom, in my opinion. Like it was just so well designed, so simple, so nice. And I would say they're definitely lower now. Maybe here. Yeah, I want to say here. Sorry, folks. All right, what else should I do? I need a break. All right, this will be interesting because these companies are all owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. And I want to say Warner Brothers Discovery is somewhere like. Wait. I feel like my allergies are kicking in, but I would say Warner Brothers. This is hard because I don't think they're a technology company anyway, but they're trying to be now. Yeah, probably around here. You could probably like say like PayPal. CNN, I want to say a little bit higher. And I don't know why. Too tired to like justify it. I would say HBO Max is higher than all of them. And again, this is because I know the design leader there. Like, I mean, I don't know him, but we like chatted briefly, and he's very likable. That's my rationale. I would have a drink with this person. Oh God, this is why I should not work in HR ever. I would just people would make so much money suing the company I represented. So I want to say, yeah, you can like talk me into like a solid B, even though I have issues with their app. So I think this is the problem is that I'm getting tired at this point, so I'm just like not really thinking through. I'm just like, what's my instinct? Yeah, that is true. It's true. I can't dispute that. But I just like it. I like HBO a lot because of their content. Like I fucking love The Wire. I used to love Game of Thrones before the last two seasons. And if you any platform that has The Wire on it, I'm like you get like a full letter grade like improvement just based off that. So yeah, no good justification. What's a designer's company? Something recruiters might not know, but it's prestigious to designers. Linear? Yeah, I think Linear is like pretty sexy right now. I don't know if they're like S level, but yeah, I would say like almost like between there. I'm gonna say this. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You know what? Most recruiters don't. Most recruiters just kind of like base it off their hunch. And when you get tired after looking at like 300 resumes, you're gonna be like playing off your hunch anyway. So if anything, this is more realistic. So you're welcome. The Wire's basically my everyday existence here. Well, no, you're like one of the white people in like the nice area. So yeah, you're like one of the politicians who's like ruining and destroying Baltimore for their own like greed and profit. Oh yeah, that's true. I think this is so bad. Like I should not be speaking for recruiters this way, but yeah, I sleepy time will kick my ass and probably like that'll definitely affect things. Ooh, what else is good here? Square. Square is interesting. I feel like they have good design, even though I don't use their product. So I'm gonna put it here. Yeah, it's definitely above Atlassian. Maybe like same level as Uber, but I don't say it's a solid A for me. No, it's not. I would say it's like a high B. I think this is actually a really interesting question. It's like, what if you worked at a smaller startup that most recruiters do not know, and how do they feel about that? I think most recruiters would be like, okay, it's a startup. I don't know anything about it, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit more digging. I might check their website. I might, talk to them more to figure out what is this startup, what does it do, how well does it match the product and the space that the role I'm recruiting for is. So if I find out this startup is in the same exact industry as a competitor of the company I'm recruiting for, then yeah, that elevates it. But if I don't know them, that kind of downgrades it a little bit. So it becomes more of I got to spend more time to figure this out. But initial reaction would be confused. But then again, if you look at the name and the logo, that might change your views a little bit. Because if it's a really well designed logo, it might feel like a bigger or more established startup versus one that has like a shitty, ugly logo. Then you're just like, oh, this looks like like I'm not even gonna spend time digging into this. Where do your no, Bill. When you see someone with a lot of startup experience but with names that are unknown, what's that like? Oh, I just answered that. Yeah. So let's say I don't know, some companies here I don't know the name of, or I don't know what they do. And let me see, how would I go about doing this? Okay. I guess most designers, well, I think most people would know Postman. If you're like developing with APIs, you gotta know them. But I bet most recruiters don't know about them. So the first thing you would think is, okay, Postman, is that like a mailing company like UPS? So you're gonna like go into the website, you could dig into it, and as a recruiter, if I don't know anything about APIs, like most recruiters don't know about it, they would say, okay, API stuff, I don't know. Um, Postman. So I would say this is not relevant, so I'll probably downgrade it unless I happen to know the company I'm hiring for works with like building tools for developers, then yeah, Postman would then be elevated. So if I didn't know Postman, it would probably be like somewhere down here. But because I do know them, so around here. Not a strong reason, I guess. All right, we're at time almost, and I am getting tired. So any last requests before we get the hell out of here? I mean, we didn't get to 100, but I think we made pretty good progress. Tinder, that's a good one. I'll say Tinder's like up here. I mean, it's like a very simple interface, but it's original. Not like any designer there who works at Tinder created interface like the founders did. I mean, they didn't like create it; they just like popularized it. But it's great, and it's just known for like really elegant design. So I want to put it up there. eBay, let's do some quick ones. eBay, probably around here. Asana is up there for me. And what else? What else? Home Depot, probably like up there with Lowe's. I don't really know a lot about them. McDonald's, I think that's interesting because they actually have really good design if you think about it, right? Like their app, their digital interfaces within the store, it's all pretty good. But I don't think most people realize that. So I want to say it's like a C, even though I think their design is better than say CNN. So that's kind of like a that's kind of yeah, it's tough. It's a contradiction for sure. Costco, I'm not gonna do Costco. Oh, I already did Facebook. Facebook is, well, Meta, I guess, controls everything. Wells Fargo, a lot of controversy, pretty racist. Sorry, down there. Capital One. I think most recruiters don't realize how good the design for Capital One is and how they bought up one of the bigger design firms when they first started out. Not first started, but like at one point they bought like a pretty big design firm from Peter Merholz, and I want to say they're up there just for me, definitely above the other banks. Are they a solid B? You can actually make the argument they're a solid B for their industry, but I'm gonna put it up down here. Airtable. I used to love Airtable, and at one point I would put them like up here, like definitely solid A at one point. I don't know anymore. I think they're like here now, fortunately. I still use the product now and then, but I think Notion has taken over for me, unfortunately. Twitch is interesting. Anara, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I don't use Twitch. I mean, I know about it. I game a bit here and there. Yeah, I think that's like a good place for them. What else is like worth it for me to do? Estee Lauder, UPS. Already did Spotify, so I should delete that. MailChimp. MailChimp is interesting. I think good designers work there. I don't like their interface that much, but they're popular. I'm gonna put it down here. Sorry, didn't really think this went through. What else? Oh, Adobe. I gotta do Adobe. That's definitely a must do. Hmm. I grew up using Adobe. I've been using Adobe software. Like I got Adobe Photoshop 5.5 back around middle school. So, and I used to work as a photographer, so I was like very, very deep into Photoshop and Illustrator to an extent. And then Sketch came around, and I just stopped using them. But once in a while, I still use them, for photo editing tools. And I know folks who work there. This one's hard. I think their design is down here, maybe in this area, but I think they're prestigious for some reason because they make design tools that are extremely popular. So I want to say around here. Yeah, I feel comfortable with that. Booking.com and their recruiting turnover. Ooh. I don't think I included their logo. But I think that's a good one to do as well. Just grabbing the logo. Here we go. Booking.com. I don't like using their software, their site. I think that's what brings it down for me. But they're okay. I feel like, definitely really difficult challenges working in this space. And I feel like if you're a designer there, you gotta know your shit to do well. But from a prestige perspective, just like if you use their software, I mean their website, it's tough. And also they have bad customer service. It's like it's not great. So I'm gonna put them there. Something's like Microsoft. Oh, this one's tough. It's tough because Microsoft is a big, legit company. And yeah, I'm going to put them a solid B. depends, they're so huge. It depends on like where, like which team you work on. I think there's definitely like more design mature teams or products versus others. But bell chart, yeah, I mean for sure, like for sure. But also keep in mind that, I picked out these logos because they're the ones that oh, here's booking.com. No, I see it. I gotta do a better job of like organizing it so I'm not so confused and I can't find the logos and shit. So yeah. Yeah, that's where everything is. Hmm. Yeah, bell chart. I think that makes sense. Look, again, I gotta run soon, but looking through all this stuff, just keep in mind that this is not logical. This is not defensible anyway, and it is very, very biased. And the whole point of me showing this is so that people get an idea of just how recruiters think about it and how we approach this problem. Because we're just like trying to share strength signals, like we're trying to like make quick snap decisions when we're looking through like 100 different resumes, like who's better, right? And who should we interview? So this helps us inform that decision. It's very much imperfect. It's very much biased, and there are clear issues with it, but that's unfortunately is the best tool we have currently. So please forgive me. This is so tempting. It's like a fun game for me at this point. I want to do one more. What's a good one? One more, and I can sign off. Ooh. What's worth it? What sticks out for me here? Walt Disney Company. That's a good one. So, not a kid anymore, but I do watch their streaming service, and I know a few designers who work there. So, I'm sorry, folks. If you work on a streaming service at Disney, you get put to like a solid B. Because I do like their streaming service. I think it's pretty well designed. It's better than HBO, in my opinion. And they have all the Pixar movies, so that's hard. But if you're not working the streaming service, how low can you go? Probably around here. Yeah, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. We'll do one more. I'm gonna do. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Why not? I don't care. Yeah, I don't know. What else? UPS. Yeah. Delta. They have better website than most other airlines, but yeah, fucking hate airlines, man. Oh, TikTok. That's a good one. That is good. TikTok. I probably didn't do TikTok. The apps of my people, this is my people right here. And it's, they just churn through so many people. Like you go there, you work your ass off, So only Chinese listeners will understand this. 996. If you heard of 996, like TikTok reminds me of 996. 996 stands for you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. So I feel like they just go through people so much. They churn through them because people get really burned out. But it is prestigious. So I'm gonna say around here. Yeah, okay. So that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for staying for like full hour and 40 minutes. Really appreciate it. If you feel insulted, if you feel offended by any of this, please come at me on LinkedIn. I don't care. Fuck you. I don't care what you think. I will defend this to the death. So yeah, hope you have fun. And if you want me to do more like this, let me know. All the recruiters I've reached out to about this, they were like, no, fuck no, I'm not touching this. So hit them up and be like, you're a coward. Call them. No, please don't do that. That's really me. But if any recruiters or any other hiring managers are, interested in doing this, like co-hosting this with me, I would very much appreciate it. I hate doing this by myself. And it was fun. I enjoyed myself. And please do not reference this in the future. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.